At 10:22 a.m. on June 4, 1942, American dive bombers fly 15,000 feet above the Pacific. They push their noses down and drop. Exactly 4 minutes later, 3 of the most powerful aircraft carriers in the Japanese Imperial Navy are blazing infernos. Up until this exact morning, the Japanese military had swept across Southeast Asia and the Pacific with staggering, uncontested victories. To the world, it looked like a miracle. But these 4 minutes were the culmination of months of secret work and a series of high-stakes gambles that finally reached their breaking point. To understand how the U.S. managed to set this trap, we have to rewind 6 months to December 1941. Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor inflicted massive damage, sinking American battleships and killing thousands. But amid all that destruction, the attacking forces ignored the vital fuel storage tanks and naval repair yards. More importantly, the American aircraft carriers simply hadn't been in the harbor that morning. They survived completely untouched. The commander of the Japanese combined fleet, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, realized that American industrial output would quickly outpace Japan's. He had to hunt down and destroy those surviving carriers before the U.S. Navy could recover. So he designed a trap. By launching a massive invasion force toward the tiny, remote atoll of Midway, Yamamoto figured the American carriers would be forced to rush out and defend it. When they arrived, his hidden fleet would be waiting to obliterate them. The entire strategy hinged on the element of surprise. Unfortunately for Yamamoto, the Americans were already reading his mail. Deep in a basement in Hawaii, an eccentric team of American codebreakers, known as Station HYPO, was working in absolute secrecy, obsessively deciphering intercepted Japanese naval radio transmissions. They managed to crack fragments of the Japanese naval code, JN-25. Through those fragments, they recognized a massive strike was being planned against a target the Japanese referred to only as AF. The team suspected AF meant Midway, but top officials in Washington disagreed. To prove it, the codebreakers instructed the American base at Midway to broadcast a fake, totally unencrypted message, complaining that their water distillation plant was broken. Days later, the Americans intercepted a new coded Japanese transmission reporting back to Tokyo. Target AF is running short on fresh water. Armed with this definitive proof, the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, Admiral Chester Nimitz, secretly ordered his patched-up aircraft carriers to wait at a rendezvous point northeast of Midway, affectionately dubbed Point Luck. The Japanese were now sailing straight into an ambush, entirely unaware that their targets were already waiting for them. On the morning of June 4th, the Japanese strike force, led by Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, began bombing the island of Midway. Looking out at the empty ocean, Nagumo assumed the American fleet was nowhere near the area. The first strike didn't quite finish off the island's runways. Nagumo ordered his deck crews to remove the heavy anti-ship torpedoes from his reserve planes and swap them for land bombs to hit Midway a second time. Midway through this agonizingly slow process, a Japanese scout plane suddenly broke radio silence. An American aircraft carrier had been spotted. Stunned, Nagumo desperately ordered his crews to halt the land bombs and frantically switch everything back to torpedoes. The hangars of the mighty Japanese aircraft carriers descended into chaos. They were suddenly cluttered with unspooled fuel hoses and stacks of highly explosive munitions just lying exposed on the decks. It was in this exact moment that the first wave of American planes arrived. They were slow, low-flying torpedo bombers without any fighter protection. The Japanese anti-aircraft fire and swarming Zero fighters ruthlessly shot them down, annihilating the squadrons without a single American torpedo scoring a hit. Down on the ships, the Japanese sailors must have felt invincible, but the suicidal sacrifice of the American torpedo bombers forced all the defending Zeros down to the ocean surface to engage them. This maneuver left the high-altitude skies directly above the Japanese fleet completely empty, which brings us exactly back to 10:22 a.m. American dive bomber squadrons broke through the clouds at 15,000 feet and looked down to see the Japanese carriers steaming in formation, utterly exposed. Their payloads smashed right through the wooden flight decks and detonated deep inside the enclosed hangars below. All of those unspooled fuel lines, land bombs, and torpedoes that Admiral Nagumo's crews had left lying around sparked a chain reaction of secondary explosions, tearing the massive ships apart from the inside out. By 10:26 a.m., it was over. Japan would lose 4 irreplaceable fleet carriers, the beating heart of its naval power, along with hundreds of its most experienced pilots. The myth of Japanese invincibility had been shattered. From this moment on, Japan would be pushed onto the defensive, as the United States began a brutal island-hopping campaign all the way to the Japanese mainland.